Oh, hello friends. And today, I'd like to talk to you about a topic very near and dear to my heart. The Fault in Our Stars. And while we're on that note, I'd like to talk to you about a topic somewhat less near and dear to my heart. The Fault in Our Stars, the movie. At 10 a.m. on Friday, June 6th, I excitedly waltzed into the theater to see The Fault in Our Stars, the movie. It was one of the moments when I suddenly realized how much I really was not fond of other teenage girls. Now don't think that I'm prejudiced here, because I read the book 10 times, and there were girls there like, oh my gosh, I hear it's a love story. So, I was already quite... On one hand, it's true that I am kind of one of those fanatical The Fault in Our Stars fans. I mean, I made a freaking cake for it the day before. I read the book 10 times. I'm not really one to talk. But on the other hand, I'm not nearly as critical about movies as most people. Like Harry Potter, half the books were like 700 pages. You can't expect every detail to be perfect. Nevertheless, I kind of had certain expectations for The Fault in Our Stars that weren't met the exact way I had hoped. So first things first, I wanted to say before I begin any of this that it's not that I didn't like The Fault in Our Stars, the movie. I joke about how I didn't like it. It's not that. It was a good movie. It was a really good movie. But at the same time, I don't feel like it was the best interpretation of the book, and I was really into the book. So I wish they could have done more like the book, or so. Without further ado, these are the 5 things that I was most displeased about in The Fault in Our Stars, the movie. So the number 5 thing that was really displeasing to me was that Hazel seemed so, like, normal. And that was a bit disappointing to me, because in the book she had this really sassy internal dialogue. In the book she had this really sassy internal monologue. And I felt like that was really important. And I know you can't convey that all in the movie since a lot of it is visual based. But at the same time, she was really witty in the book and very creative, clever, interesting. And I feel like I missed out on a lot of that in the movie. And while a lot of it is understandable, I still wish that they could have done more. Okay, number 4. Woo! No Caitlin. Okay, I know. She's a minor character, no big deal. They had to cut her because they didn't want a 7-hour movie. I mean, I wanted a 7-hour movie, but most people didn't. At the same time, I feel like Caitlin was really important, and I didn't actually think about her all that much in the book. Like, don't get me wrong, in the book I was like, oh, I like her, she's cute and funny, but she didn't really seem important. But when I watched the movie, I suddenly realized just how important she was. After watching the movie, I realized that Caitlin's primary purpose in the book was to reveal how out of touch Hazel was with the whole world. Like, Caitlin isn't normal, but she's the most normal thing that Hazel knows. In the movie, it just seems like Hazel and Gus are just normal teenagers who happen to have cancer. But actually in the book, Gus might be kind of in touch, but Hazel is so distant and she feels very awkward about the world. And I think it's a point that a lot of us can relate to her in, because a lot of us who read the book don't actually feel like we connect to other people. And I didn't get the same feeling in the movie. Number 3. No Caroline Mathers. Okay, she wasn't technically mentioned that often in the book. Like, they didn't actually sit there. She didn't even appear in the book. She didn't get a lot of references, but every now and again she was brought up because she's a major part of a certain character's backstory. She really influenced the book from the beginning to the end. Gus never would have looked over at Hazel if Caroline Mathers hadn't existed, and Hazel wouldn't have decided that she was a grenade if Caroline Mathers hadn't existed, and she wouldn't have tried to avoid Gus if Caroline Mathers hadn't existed. So in the movie, just a total lack of her whole existence was very, very different, and it seemed like a lot of things had these major plot holes in them. It didn't feed as well into the main story, even though she was only part of a backstory. So number 2 comes with a story! Story time! Yay! So I was just walking around at track practice. Don't ask me why I do track, that's a whole different story. I'll probably make a video sulking about it later on. But I was just walking around at track practice and a friend of mine walked up to me. We were talking about The Fault in Our Stars and I was saying, oh, it's like my favorite book beside Harry Potter. And she's like, oh yeah, I love Harry Potter. And then she was like, I haven't read The Fault in Our Stars because I'm not really big on love stories. And so I said, well, I don't like love stories either. And that's the thing about The Fault in Our Stars. I could say that I don't like love stories and still say that I like The Fault in Our Stars, and it didn't contradict, because The Fault in Our Stars isn't really a love story as much as it's a life story. In the book, I felt like the main theme was about how are humans important? If you have to do great things to be considered important, or if you're just important because you exist, or because of people who love you, or what it means to be important. And you experience that through a variety of ways. You experience that through the love that Gus and Hazel share, and you also experience it through the death story, and through their living and dying and doing stuff. Teenager stuff, adult stuff, just living life. And in the movie, you didn't get as much of that. I caught about 3-ish references to Gus talking about how he wanted to matter, and Hazel kind of brushed all of them off. And in the book, she actually struggled a bit with it before trying to dispel those feelings, but in the movie, it just seemed like, oh, it wasn't important, because Hazel was fine and Hazel didn't feel like that. But I feel like it's something that everyone struggles with at some point, mattering. I mean, I struggle with it. So I feel like it was really important that was the theme of the book, and that I could honestly say that the book was a life story, and it seems like the movie literally is more just of a love story. So in that sense, I feel like the book is superior because it describes a love story, but in the context of a life story. And even though I'm making all these things out to sound like huge flaws and all that, there is one thing that if they had done it, it could have changed everything. The title. I mean, The Fault in Our Stars is a really cool title. I mean, Shakespeare references are cool as hecky. Yeah. But in the movie, since they left out the part where Van Houten sends a letter to Augustus describing, oh, the fault in our stars, the fault in ourselves, all that, you entirely miss out on what the title means. Ah! Okay, I understand. They had to cut a few things from the movie, that's all fine. I could have even accepted it if they had cut the title from the movie. But they bedazzled everything with stars. The movie posters were covered with stars. The previews were covered with stars. Like, everything in the whole movie was covered with stars. And then they didn't explain it. So it's like, now just cancer means stars? I don't know. That doesn't make sense. And one last thing. Why did they make the text like that? They look so silly and goofy and I don't like them. I just feel like they should have been more serious. And would Gus really say OMG, to be honest? Yeah. Okay, so maybe the movie wasn't as perfect as the book, but, you know, it's okay. So I can still enjoy my cake. I'm such a lonely child. What was I saying?